so she's going to be promoting and making awareness for the Middle East churches in the ELCA. And so part of it will be remote, part of it will be going to like some assemblies, like all of that. So really part of everything that's been happening has created a whole new awareness of the Christian churches and the Lutheran churches in the Jordan and the Middle East. And so because she'd been over there so much, yeah, and she does a lot of online, she does a lot of tech stuff, and so it kind of made some sense. And so it's an uncalled position because corporate had put a freeze on call positions right now just because, yeah, finance is coming through. So she's also interviewing with churches. But for her to be in a parish, it's going to be a really good church. Because her call into ministry as a pastor, she's not a typical, she's not going to be doing children's we're all called in different places. And so for her to be in a congregation, that's going to be kind of, do you need a book? Yes, she does. There you go. I got one.
I got yours. I can have yours.
There you go.
Yes. I know it's my gray hair. You can't see me anymore.
So I will leave on Tuesday next week.
And I got you one.
So Wednesday is vacation.
I'm going to put on the end in case I have to dash out your phone. I don't think I will.
I'll leave today. I'm going to have lunch with Pastor Sharon Wagner and Deanna Guile, who's another Methodist pastor here. So we're having lunch today. Come back from that, then I'm meeting Jeff and James to talk about Resurrection Sings. And then I'm meeting AJ and Luke so we can talk about contemporary Christmas Eve. And then we've got another cottage meeting tonight. Just met with the call committee this morning that's calling our fourth pastor. And so it's just 10 days. Not too bad actually, because Thanksgiving's in that time. And so flying back on Saturday for the energy. I'm probably going to spend Thanksgiving not talking to us. No, here. There is. So you guys know this. I'm an introvert. And we've been doing, for the first time ever, we've been doing cottage meetings in the evenings. And so Pastor Tim and I have been on the road every night for the past 2 weeks. So this little introverted heart has gotten very little touch. Yeah, so I'm just like, yeah, so I mean, just might be me and the cats, and I don't even know if I'll talk to them. Like, I haven't even gotten over to Hearts That Firm, and she does in the past couple of weeks. No, so I'm going to go, while I'm on my staycation, I'm going to go over there to be able to spend some time with these kids. Yeah. I wish it was the other way around. I know Florida's going to be a lot more emotional. But it would. But it just, it's calendar and it's not way. So. There's so much drama in my family. Yeah, there's so much drama. And I really do think I may not talk to a couple members of my family after this event. And I've already kind of drawn some boundaries. And so I was like, I do want someone. And she's either I'll bring the knives or bring the tissues, whatever. But she's that kind of friend. That she got no problem. She's like, what am I bringing knives or am I bringing tissues? I'm like, bring them both, but I'm not sure yet. And just check in with me throughout and we'll figure it out. So, sometimes you need those kinds of friends. It is. And hard is beautiful and there's some wonderful things. And there's some times where you're working. There's a little syrup I stuck with my mom. just ran out of books, so I have to order more. I know. So I'll order more and we'll have them. Oh, okay. Because they have 2, because they're a couple, but we'll get more. Whatever. If people are still talking while I'm talking, Bob, then obviously I need to be louder. Right? Well, welcome. Welcome to class today. Way to go. We are in week 3 of Unafraid, and we will not be fearful today as we encounter this. A couple of housekeeping things, and I'll remind you again at the end. We will not meet next Monday. Next Monday, I'm on vacation, so don't text, don't call. I know. Nope. I'm still living with a comment that was made at the leadership conference that Pastor Tim White and I went to, and they said a good vacation does not make up for bad vocation. Right? So many times we work I was like, oh gosh, I just got to get through these 2 days because then I've got vacation, right? Or we think, oh, if I can just get to the weekend, I'll be good to go. But this concept that a good vacation does not make up for bad or poor vocation of the things that we're called into. So that's going to haunt me while I'm on vacation, because I have been living in I just got to get through. Because we're in a good season of the church. We are in a great season of the church. There's lots happening. But so we will not be meeting next Monday. And then I think we have 2 weeks after that is my thought, right? As we kind of go through this. Again, welcome to all. Some of the people, we have first-timers. We always welcome our first-timers as well. For those of you online, I know some of you have been catching that up there as well, so it's good to be seen by you. Today we'll be working on the section of fear and loneliness and failure. Just such uplifting things to be talking about today. Oh, as the holidays come in, especially of the loneliness, insignificance, disappointing others. I will I'll start out with a little bit of a true confession, and then Jojo, we'll go to that opening slide with the question. True confession of disappointing others. I am not prepared today. I will just let you know it has been a really hard week. And generally on Sundays, I'm like, okay, I'll read. Yesterday I was sharing, I went to bed at about 7:30 because I'd been up since 4 trying to get everything with all the stuff that's happening. So this morning, again, I got up at 4. I'm like, okay, I'll be able to do this. Red came into the office, which was a mistake, thinking, I'll come in like at 7:30 and no... and then didn't sit down at my desk again until about 10 minutes before class. So I am sorry if I am disappointing you today. I'm not as prepared as I normally am, but I trust you'll have grace and forgiveness. And I did my hair really cute for you too. So, all right. So as is our tradition, what we will do is I want you to spend some time getting to know one another. That's part of our goals of our time together. And I want you to share this question. We're just going to start with being vulnerable. Why not? Share a time when you experienced failure. And then it's like, oh, yeah. Hi, my name is Erin, and I failed at this. So you can share your own personal, right, when you have failed. But you can also share when someone failed you. But you can also share a larger piece, a failure of our medical system, right? As I've talked to people and trying to figure out, can I afford food or can I afford my prescriptions, right? So you can talk also in a global perspective, failure of our education system. And so failure of your church. I'm sure some of you have experienced times when your church has failed you. So feel free to share in whatever experience that is, a time that you have failed, a time that someone has failed you, or even a global perspective as to where you experience failure. So I'll give you about 5 minutes or so. So again, find someone, feel free to get up, cross the aisle, we do that here, and have a conversation.
Okay. Oh,
How's that working out for you?
All right, you got about 30 seconds.
Okay, so I would say my biggest maybe my specific time when I was working at research sometimes I would
All right. Would anyone like to share any of the failures, since I've already confessed many to you? Would anyone like to join me in the safe space of confession, to know that I'm not alone? What are the failures that you spoke about? Failure of a marriage. Failure of a marriage. Thank you. That's very vulnerable. That's very hard.
Which becomes a learning experience
Yeah.
that helps you in your future after the failure of the marriage.
Yeah, so failure of a marriage can result in a learning experience, which then can help you in the future, which that can probably be said about a lot of our failures in our lives, right? That it gives us this great opportunity to learn, and maybe the next time grow from that. Excellent. What else? What other failures did you speak about? Yeah?
failures of friendships.
Failures of friendships. Oh, interesting. And when you find out they're strongly opposed to different beliefs, and how that can then values, yeah. That's huge. That's huge. I'm in I hate to put friends to the test, but I'm kind of doing that. I have a text chain with my college girlfriends. It's been going for years. And we just spent some time together this summer in Costa Rica. And I realized we had really grown in different ways. So I have not responded to that text chain since August. Someone has had a grandbaby. I didn't respond. Like, all these things have gone on. Not one of them have said anything. Right? And so, I mean, I still love these people dearly, but it was just one of those, that was failure of friendships. And then part of me is like, where did I go wrong? That we feel we don't have this deep connection, and what that is. So yeah, so there's failure of friendships. What other failures did you guys talk about? Failure within a church. Yeah. Resurrection's gone through that, hadn't they? Yes, if you've ridden this journey for a while, I got to tell you, Resurrection's not the first church. And I'm also going to tell you, it's not the last time we will experience that here at Resurrection. I got to tell you, folks, pastors aren't perfect. Church members, none of you all are perfect.
Yes, we are.
And so churches are full of broken people practicing their brokenness. And so we will experience hard times again. The question is, will we have learned from the last time? And how will we go through it differently? Good. I heard another muttering over here.
I regret that I wasn't more compassionate with my parents. Now and I was good to them, and they said I was good to them, but now that I'm getting older, I realize that, I wish I would have done something more for my parents on that one.
Yeah, so she spoke about being regretful of not being more compassionate to her parents. And now that she is in that space, especially as an aging adult, you see it from a different side. And so sometimes that failure of ourselves to love the people that we're called to love, to be compassionate with other people who are in our lives that way, especially our parents. Yeah, others, yeah.
Well, I think in small ways, I can fail almost every day. Not meeting, maybe I set a goal and I don't meet it.
Yeah.
But it's in a little way. So it's kind of like sometimes I feel I fail myself.
Yes.
Accomplishing something that I haven't.
Yes.
Nobody else has put it on me. I've just put it on myself.
Right, so Judy's speaking about every day she fails herself. Like every day that there's something going on that you have the potential to fail yourself, and how much that weighs on your own when you're failing yourself, and what you set. I'm going to lose 10 pounds, right? I'm going to call my friend. I'm going to save better finances. I'm going to be nicer to the people driving really slow in front of me, right? Like whatever that is. I'm not going to use curse words out loud, like whatever that is. But when we fail ourselves, there's a whole.
God, I have Jesus. So I mean,
Yeah.
I have forgiveness, so that helps.
Yeah. That concept of knowing that we need a savior because we can't save ourselves is a whole reality we live in. Excellent. Yeah.
Having female emotions in a predominantly male-dominated field.
Yeah, having female emotions in a predominantly male field. I will thank all of the women in this room, because you have paved pathways for women like myself and for women who are younger than me. There was a time in our lives where female pastors could not just dye their hair for fun. They could not wear lighty-up shoes. They could not wear colored sundresses and just slap a collar underneath.
They couldn't wear makeup.
They couldn't wear makeup.
Couldn't be pastors.
And they couldn't be pastors. There was, when I was in Colorado, so we're talking 2005-ish, a young college woman came up to me and she said, I feel this call to ministry. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. She's like, but I don't want to cut my hair short. Because every female pastor she had seen, in order to fit into a male-dominated field, and if you look back at our records, like boxy clergy shirts, like the whole, and so having to fit into male-dominated fields. And so because of the women here who have paved pathways, and because of the women pastors that have paved those pathways, I am able to be the woman of God that God created, and have congregations that embrace that woman of God that God created. So yeah.
There's a Christian rock group called Super Chick, which has a phenomenal song called We All Fall.
Yeah. We All Fall by Super Chick. Yeah.
It's on YouTube. It's excellent.
We All Fall by Super Chick, a Christian band. And so that feeling of failure, right? That we all live with it. And the reality is we're all gonna fail. right? We're not perfect. We're all gonna fail. And even sometimes when we succeed, it's at the cost of someone else failing, right? And so even our success can be tied to others' failures. And where do we have the compassion, right? To be able to rejoice in our success, but also have the compassion for others who fail in that same space. So we're gonna talk more about failure, because that's just an uplifting experience. And yet, it ties us together. Right? Again, I keep saying that the Holy Spirit is calling Resurrection to be a different kind of community. I think it's called to be a community that admits our failures. Right? We are called to be in a place that says, I have messed up today. I am not perfect. And I know the people sitting right beside me are in that same way. But also, when we hurt one another, to be able to say, I'm sorry I failed you in relationship. And please forgive me. And can we repair this? Because we are all broken human beings. And we need to be able to have that safe space. And again, what if our country, what if our world, what if our government was a safe space to be able to say, I'm sorry I failed you? And can we work towards getting better together? And what that looks like. So with that, we're going to watch a little our video. Again, this is Adam Hamilton. So Jojo, if you'll give us number 3.
Well, as we gather together for this session, we're going to be talking about some really important things we experience in our own lives. We're going to talk about the fear of failure, the fear of criticism, the fear of rejection, the fear of disappointing other people, the fear of insignificance and loneliness. And I see a lot of head shaking going on around here. Because these are the kind of things that all of us as human beings wrestle with and experience in our lives. And so we're going to look to see how does that fear affect our lives? How do we overcome that kind of fear? And I think about the paralysis that comes, especially when I think about the fear of failure. If I am afraid of failing, I'm afraid of embarrassing myself, I'm afraid of being criticized, if that fear is too strong, we're all going to feel that fear. But if I don't overcome that fear, and in essence, the definition of courage is in some ways overcoming our fears and doing what we're afraid to do. If I don't overcome that fear, I'm not going to accomplish anything, do anything, really experience any of the great experiences of life. So fear of failure is one of those things that can be it can stop us from truly living. I think about, in addition to that, the fear of loneliness and the fear of rejection from people. And how many people live with that sense of just being afraid that I'm never going to have, maybe I'm never going to have a spouse, maybe I'm never going to have love, I'm never going to experience that. And in particular, there's been, over the last few years, an increase in the number of suicides. In the community where I live, there's been a huge increase in suicides. We've seen, now it's 20 suicides in the last 6 months. Not all of them church members, many of them family members or friends.
Oh, wow.
But people who are feeling either that life is meaningless or hopeless, or I'm unloved and I'm never going to have it or experience love. I mean, this fear that it's never going to get any better, and that whatever I'm experiencing, this is the way it's always going to be. So I guess I'd like to ask you first, when and where have you experienced a fear of criticism or a fear of failure, and did you ever experience that to a degree that you didn't go ahead and do the thing? Maybe it just kept you from moving ahead. And I'd like to start with you, Carlos. I wonder if you have.
Yeah, English is not my first language, and when I had the opportunity to go to seminary, I was blessed to receive a scholarship for me to go through a very highly academic institution, and I was so afraid of failing that I put at risk my relationship at home with my wife, because I was just trying to overextend of the things that I could do, and the difficulties of me trying to write academic papers, and it was a very, very, very miserable time. And to be honest, there were moments in which I felt alone. There were moments in which I just felt that I was completely just is full of stress, and I'm thankful because of our connection with the United Methodist Church. I was able to find a group of people that walk along with me in that phase, but I was terrified about just failing.
Yeah, that's understandable. How about you, Ginger? Any times
Yeah,
where-
well, for me, it's finding the courage to post a blog post, to hit the send button, knowing not everybody's going to agree with this, and not everybody's going to interpret it the same way I do. But I was at a neighborhood party one night, and I was about to quit. I was like, maybe I'm not meant to be a writer. It's too scary. And I was writing on some opinions that were hot topics at the time, and people weren't agreeing with me and posting their comments. And so I was about to throw in the towel, and a man at a neighborhood party said, I don't go to church. I don't want to go to church, but I get on my wife's Facebook on Sunday morning, and I read your post, and that's my church. And I thought, you know what? That's the sign I needed to keep doing it, no matter the criticism, because there's somebody, and and so every time I pray, God, let this touch who you need it to touch, and hit send. But I've had to I want to just hide. I don't want to put it out there because of the criticism. I want everyone to love everything I do, and if they don't. So I've just had to accept I'm going to serve those that I'm called to serve, and there will be criticism.
Yeah. How about you, Marie? Do you struggle at all with the fear of failure or fear of criticism or rejection?
Well, yes. One of the times in my career as a nurse, I remember a failure with presenting a class to a group of nurses. It was my very first time presenting that class. It was one of my very first times teaching nurses. And I was really concerned about how I was going to be able to present because I wasn't a public speaker at that time. And so I thought about how I'm going to do this. And when I looked out at them, I thought, I'm not doing this very well. I'm feeling like I'm failing. So I said to my director afterwards, I just don't think that I did this very well. And she was encouraging. What lessons did you learn from this? So take what you think is a failure and use it as an opportunity to improve on what you're doing. So it was a failure for me, but it also was an opportunity to improve in what I was doing.
Yeah, that's excellent.
That's excellent.
Yeah, it strikes me that you cannot live life and have an impact on the world, do anything that's bold or that's going to have make a difference if you're not willing to face criticism, and you're going to be criticized. And the people who make a difference in the world are the folks who refuse to give in to that fear, and they continue to move forward. So I'm wondering, in your own life, when we think about loneliness, how have you wrestled with loneliness? Do you ever wrestle with it, a fear of being unloved or a fear of loneliness? And how do you deal with that as people of faith? Marie, any thoughts on that?
Well, to combat that loneliness or that feeling of loneliness, I make sure that I'm part of groups that I can associate with, like a clergy women's group or my family, being more intentional about being with my family. Because I'm single, and so I think about those things of how do I create community for myself, and making sure that I have positive people that I'm surrounded with. And so intergenerational type of relationships as well, not just people that are my age, but having conversations with people that are older than me, that are younger than me, that can share in some of the same things that I like and things that I don't particularly care about that I can develop an interest in.
Yeah, that's good.
One of the healing experiences or the healing moments, it's that I need to share a meal with people. Like, I feel like just being at the table is just a wonderful spiritual connection, like fostering those relationships that my wife and I also experience. And my wife is not a Spanish-speaking individual, and so in the community that I serve, sometimes she also feels very lonely. And so I need to help her, and I need to help myself to foster things outside of our church and the community. And like I said, it just happens to foster those moments of having conversation. And now we're having a 3-year-old, and it's more difficult to do a lot of things. But I feel like in order to stay afloat and to survive, we need to make the time to.
Absolutely. Ginger, there's a lot of conversation today about social media and the impact it's had on real relationships. And so we can say, well, social media is real relationships, but we're finding less young people getting out to come to youth group, less young people getting involved in actual physical connections because they're connecting with each other all the time.
Yeah.
Do you how do you see that, and or why is it not enough just to be able to connect over Facebook, Twitter, Instagram?
Yeah, I think for me it's a kind of, or my theory on it is there's an energy that needs to be exchanged when people are together. I need to look in your eyes. I need to feel your energy, and we don't get that on devices. And I think that's why it takes energy to go be with somebody, and yet it feeds you. And I love being with people and get my energy from being with people. And so I had to kind of look at solitude versus loneliness, because I quickly go into loneliness, like, oh, I'm all alone and everybody else is out doing something fun, and, reading social media makes me feel like I'm missing something, that fear of missing out that you talk about in your book. And I had to turn that into a spiritual practice and be alone with God and appreciate solitude instead of letting myself wallow in that pity of loneliness. So I've had to really work at that because I do love being with people, and social media doesn't do it for me. It takes that energy of being in the presence of another person.
Yeah. I want to wrap it up by asking about the role, because you've really talked about this well, this idea of solitude versus loneliness, and that one of the companions that we have in our life when we may feel all alone is our faith in God. Yes. How have you experienced that friendship with God, and how do you cultivate a sense of God's presence for people who maybe don't feel God? How do we sense God's presence? How do we feel that we're not alone? Marie, any thoughts on your own spiritual life and how you experience God's presence in your life?
Sharing time with friends in a moment of prayer. I have a dinner group that I meet with once a month, and it's good to be able to be at the same table, but we also keep each other in prayer. And then there's a clergy women's group that I'm a part of that we gather and pray together, sing together, and share each other's concerns and keep each other lifted in prayer. I'm finding also the practice of intentionally every morning writing down my conversations with God to myself and writing in my journal of where God is speaking to me, and then the concerns that I have that I want to lift up to God, putting that down on paper, because next week I may not remember exactly what those concerns are, but I want to make sure that I have been intentional about sharing those concerns from my heart.
Excellent. So there's probably not a human being around who doesn't fear failure. Very few of us who don't fear disappointing other people. We all worry a bit about living meaningless lives or insignificant lives, and sometimes we're afraid of being alone. And that probably means we're human, but it also points to the fact that there are things that we can do, we must do, and when we do them, when we press through those feelings, we find that we live with courage and hope. So thank you for a great and meaningful conversation. Look forward to our next conversation together. I'm delighted to have with me Christian Sid as our expert today. She is the CEO and president of the Serenity Counseling Center in Gallatin, Tennessee. She's done this for 10 years there. She's been a therapist, caring for people, helping them find healing and hope. And Christian, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a delight to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So if you could, this study we're doing is on fear and how prevalent fear is and how we wrestle with our fears and how we can live unafraid. I'm just curious, in your counseling practice, how prevalent is fear? How big of an issue is fear for people today?
Fear is huge in human behavior. It's something that we all face, but it's something that at times can be crippling depending on our confidence level, our self-worth, and our environment and how confident we feel supported. So fear, sometimes we do not jump into some things or make decisions for the fear of rejection or not fitting in.
Do you see very many people who struggle with the desperate need to please other people, to try to, where they are, I think of people pleasers, and many of us, I'm a pastor, I'm a people pleaser, but you can see that almost go to a unhealthy place. Do you see much of that in your practice?
Absolutely, and we call that codependency. It is definitely that people pleaser, wanting someone to be happy with you. You're always giving, going out of your way to make that person happy with you. It's very unhealthy. It is very unhealthy, and it also breaks down family relationships, where it's very hard for individuals within a family to think independently because they're so codependent on how that other family member has thought in the past or what they will think in a certain situation in the future. So it kind of holds back that independence of having their own opinion of something.
Can you think of an example of somebody that you had worked with who had been severely codependent, and then how they became set free, or maybe the story of how they finally found liberation from that?
A lot of times in the unhealthy codependency, it does, push the other person away, such as in friendships or relationships or marriages. And just recently, that happened in a very unhealthy, very toxic relationship between, early 20s, a couple, and that relationship actually ending, showed that person that they could have, some power and self-worth and self-value without having to manipulate or control the person in the relationship.
All right, thank you. And finally, I guess I'd ask about the sense of meaning or purpose in people's lives. One of the chapters in the book is about our fear of living meaningless lives, or our fear that we will not have accomplished everything we were to accomplish. Recently, I was speaking to a couple of young people, and I asked them, what's your greatest fear? And they said, our fears, each of them separately said, my fear is that I will have missed out on accomplishing what I was supposed to accomplish, or that my life will have been ultimately meaningless. What do you see much of that, where people are living afraid that they might not live into their purpose, they might not fulfill whatever they were supposed to fulfill as a human being?
Yeah, and a lot of times when I sit down with individuals, it's when they finally settled into their careers, maybe early to mid 40s, and they say, okay, I think I've settled and found my career, but finding my purpose in life, what is that I need to seek or search? And a lot of times it's really putting things in perspective for clients and saying, what about your life that you've accomplished at this point that you feel isn't satisfying or good?
Okay, very good. What role does faith play in finding healing for people, in particular in addressing their fears of failure or meaninglessness or loneliness?
I would say for those who are believers and they're lost, or they've come to a dry spell, faith plays a huge aspect. I feel like even for unbelievers, even when we talk about faith, it's very important to begin to believe in something greater than yourself. In faith, we're not really giving or doing for ourselves. We are truly serving and doing for others without anything in reward. And that's really what our walk and our life should be about, is giving and serving, knowing that there is something higher, than ourselves that's going to be the ultimate reward in life.
Thank you so much. It's been a joy to talk to you today, Christian. Thank you for sharing with us, and God bless you.
God bless you too. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. I appreciated so much Christian's emphasis on how faith plays a role in finding healing from the fear of failure, the fear of rejection, and the fear of being unloved. I think about the word grace, and that's what comes to mind when I consider the emphasis in the chapters that you've been studying this week. Grace, this idea that you don't have to earn love, it's already given to you. That you are already important and you matter to God. Your life has meaning to God. And when in our faith we trust that, we find the fears begin to dissipate. I love my children. I love them more than I could possibly explain. I love them not because of anything they've done, but because of who they are. They are mine. They are my children. And this is how God feels about us. And when we can rest secure in the love of God, when we know our lives have meaning and purpose to Him, then we find the fear of failure, the fear of rejection, the fear of meaningless lives, the fear of being alone begins to dissipate. And we can live unafraid with courage and hope.
All right, that easy. Just believe in Jesus, everything will be fine. It's not that easy. I think we all know that. It is helpful, but it's not that easy. One of the things that he does in the book is he kind of gives, when it comes to fear especially, ways of thinking about things, about when you have a fear. He says most things are never as hard as you think, right? And so when you encounter those fears, knowing that, and I like most, because some things are really, really hard, but most things are never as hard as you think. And so to acknowledge what that looks like. He says successful people do what unsuccessful people are not willing to do. And sometimes there's a risk in that, right? That successful people do the hard work. And if it's not something you really want, then you're probably not going to do the work for it. And so again, facing that it's going to be hard and it takes work. And then the third one, he talks about how there's usually an easy path and a hard path. Choosing the hard path, there's a risk and a reward to it. I think the fear of being vulnerable, right? And so this goes into the loneliness, this goes into the purpose, this goes into the disappointing people. For a long time, I had a hard relationship with the word vulnerable. So when I thought of the word vulnerable, right, you look at a building structure and see where it's vulnerable, because you know if you hit that spot, it'll take the whole thing down, right? So for me, vulnerabilities were your weaknesses so that people could hurt you. Right? I grew up in a space where if you shared your vulnerabilities, you were then handing people the weapon to hurt you. So in my ministry and in my career, I was not an open leader in a lot of ways. And people, you need to be more vulnerable. I'm like, why would I ever tell you my weaknesses so you can hurt me? Like, it just did not make sense to me until I started working with the word vulnerability and realized what it means is it means to be open, to be soft in a way that allows other people to connect with you. And being vulnerable means sharing those hard spaces. It's a harder path, right? It's choosing the hard, but the reward of entering into those spaces with people. As a leader, there's some times where I will go to our CYF team and say, I am sorry, I have not been the leader that you needed me to be in this time. I try, Jennifer's on staff here, I try really hard to be accountable when I say, I'm sorry, I have failed you. I have not done this well. I have not set you up for success. It's hard. But I also have found that the richness of those relationships grow. And I don't want to disappoint people. I don't want to fail. Right? I don't want to, I want to make sure that I'm fulfilling my meaning and my purpose. But when I can share from that vulnerability, there's a whole new richness that we experience. And when I think about our Jesus, right? Our Jesus always shared from vulnerability and love. That was always what he did when he held the children, when he reached out to the lepers. You know, even when he had the tete-a-tete with the Pharisees and the Sadducees, that he always lived in a space of openness and being able, he cried. You know, our God cried. Our God told the disciples when he was disappointed in them. And our God prayed for them. And so our God leads from a place of vulnerability and openness. And if we can be brave enough to risk that, I mean, that's the other thing I learned, and this is Brene Brown, is there is a great bravery in being vulnerable. That you have to be strong in order to display your weakness. And so when you're able to do that, then there's a whole new strength that you're displaying with one another. I see heads shaking up and down. Does this resonate? When you hear these kinds of things, what are you thinking? What are you feeling?
You have to trust in order to be
You have to trust in order to be vulnerable.
So you have to know that other person well enough.
Yeah, you have to know the person well enough. That's a huge
It's a
thing.
generational thing too. Our generation, I'm going to say for most of us, that vulnerability, that didn't come in our lives. Whereas our kids, if I say something that kind of we'll go to therapy. well, I'm not gonna go there. Well, Mom, you'll feel so much better if you just go to therapy and just talk. Well, so I think it's a little bit of a generational thing too. I've read a lot of Brene Brown too, and to understand that the importance of being vulnerable with people and letting some stuff out.
Yes.
But anyway, but I do think it's
The generational piece, yeah. Let me reiterate just for the microphone and online that Cheryl was saying the generational piece, that most of the people in this room, your generation, was not one that spoke openly about feelings. I remember my dad, when I would be crying, if you don't stop crying, I'm going to give you something to cry about. And my childhood brain was, obviously I already have something because I'm crying. Right? And it wasn't until much later I was like, oh, you didn't think what I was crying about was really worth crying about, right? But that elder generation, the feelings, the emotions, that was not something you really delved in, dived in, explained. And nowadays, it's if you have go to therapy. Go to therapy. And that's such a more open conversation nowadays than it was. And so there is this different, the younger generation can teach us how to be more aware of our emotions, how to articulate our feelings, and what that looks like. So that's why, again, here we try to do multi-generational ministry, because there's a beautiful bridge that our younger generations can teach us as we are older. And yeah, I just said we, because I'm not young anymore. That's why I work with you guys. Always be the youngest one in the room until Pastor Wyatt walks in. Yeah, Melinda.
Well, I think in my life I have found times when I've been vulnerable and shared that with people that I find, they have some of the same issues that I have, and so then we can really get deep into sharing and help each other, because we find out we're not alone in what is going on in our life.
Yeah, so when you do have that courage to be vulnerable and to share, you are able to hear, and it makes a space for other people then to be vulnerable. Because all of a sudden there's this, I'm not alone. There's other people who feel this way. There's other people who think this way. There's other people who have experienced this. And so that courage and that risk. And folks, it is risky, right? There's a chance that you will be rejected, right? There's a chance that you will be denied. There's a lot of pastors. The pastor I worked with in South Carolina, he was from the old school model of era pastor, and we are the authority, and we don't speak of our own ineptness. I'm like, honey, then I can't work with you because I'm real inept. Like, I gotta speak about it. Like, that's just a whole, I got a boatload of failures that I'm bringing to the pulpit. So I need, but he was very much, and what we found with this lovely Southern congregation is they said, we actually like that our pastor's real now, because we can identify with them. Like, I will share with you my darkness because you let me know that you've got some darkness too. And so how we do that. Yeah, in the back, were you going to say? No? Okay. Yeah.
Well, the first time you do that, and someone says, oh yes, it's astounding, but it's also very liberating.
Yeah.
And it gives you courage to talk about it again in another situation.
Yeah, the liberation when someone's like, oh, I know what you mean. Yeah.
I didn't know you know.
And then the flip side is, right, so what if you share that and no one else says, oh yeah, I know what that's like, right? Then all of a sudden you're super disappointed, right? Or you feel that now you are disapproved of because you are the only one who's experienced that, right? There's that flip side, that risk. And when it comes to disappointing people, there's a lot of identity work of being strong. When I was doing youth ministry, and I first started doing youth ministry, right, I was just 23, 24 years old. I grew up at a church of 25 people on a good day. We didn't have youth ministry, so I really didn't know what I was getting into. I was poor. I was functionally poor. We didn't have much at all, but we ate squirrel. I thought it was because it was good. It's because we didn't have money for food. And so the first church I worked at was this super highfalutin suburban church, all these rich people, and it was the cool church. We'd have lock-ins, had to limit the amount of friends kids could bring to lock-ins because I couldn't get enough parents because it was the cool church, right? And so part of that then was this, I wanted the kids to think I was cool. And so my whole identity rested on if they thought I was cool or not. And it took me a while to be like, you're 15.
Yeah.
I'm 24. If my identity rests on whether a 15-year-old thinks I'm cool or not, I need therapy. Right? And so part of that was knowing the disappointment. Yeah, I'm disappointed when kids don't like me. But I no longer let it sink to my soul as much because I'm a child of God and that's my worth, right? My worth isn't whether people like me or not. And so sometimes, how many of you guys find you fall into that people pleaser mentality? I wonder, does someone say not so much anymore? I think I've always kind of envied the elders. Because I do feel like you learn a little bit more, and maybe you just choose which people you want to please, even if that just gets smaller, right? Like the list of people on my island, it gets smaller and I should always be on your list, by the way, of people you want to please. But that list maybe gets smaller of who you want to please or what matters in those relationships. Because I do think the older you get, the more. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can't wait. Yeah, like I don't care. Right? And I think also, you come to a place of, I know I'm going to disappoint people. Right? That's, I tell Pastor Tim, because Pastor Tim, God love his heart, because he never wants people to be disappointed. And that's where he and I'm like, I disappoint people all the time. Like I know it. Like just the question is, am I going to disappoint you at a 3 or a 9? Because I'm going to disappoint you. It's just, I need to know what level. Because I'm going to really try hard not to do the 9. But the 3s, I'm okay with. Right? I'm okay with that now. And so just kind of that knowing, and I think as we get older, we just know we're going to disappoint people. And so and I think some of you noticed I started signing my emails, Pastor Aaron, flawed and faithful. Like, I'm just going to put the disappointment out there. So don't even expect it, because it's gonna happen, because you may not get a return email for like a week. Flawed and faithful. I'm doing the best I can, folks. Right? And so part of that disappointment. What about when it comes to meaning? There's a whole section in this book about finding meaning and purpose. How do you guys find meaning and purpose in this world? Worship?
Well, I think it takes a lot of intention.
Intention.
You have to figure out what's going to give you, and then move towards that.
Yeah, what's going to give you meaning and then move towards that. Yeah.
This one probably comes with age. It goes along with having a smaller group of people that you're trying to please. But so our families get together for Thanksgiving, and I've been thinking about what little tidbit of wisdom I might be able to pass on to the adult kids. And that is, I'm realizing things that at one time were so important. Identity, job, security, and making enough money, having enough money, not spending too much money. So what it's leading up to is what I do, the small things I do in service to others are so much more important. All that stuff that I used to obsess over doing and having means so much less.
Yeah, and so that, and I will add to that, Alan, I think the world pushes us into the purpose and meaning of our jobs, of our status, of all of these big things, right? That there is a push, especially when you are, Pastor Roger, when we were talking about different ministries, he said, ministries to adults and young adults, he said it's about building. You're building your life, you're building your family, you're building your reputation, you're building all these things. As you get older, your ministry becomes about reflecting. And now you're reflecting back into all of those things and what was that looking like. And so finding purpose in the small things and of service to others. When I think about my purpose and my meaning, all I want at the end of my life, and whether it's tomorrow, whether it's in 30 years, all I want is for God to say, well done, good and faithful servant. That's all I want. That's my dream and that's my desire. And I will tell you, I am haunted by the times I know I've failed people. Like that'll bring me to tears more than anything. If I've hurt people in the name of Jesus. When I have failed people in the name of Jesus. Because I don't ever want that to transpire into their relationship with Jesus. That's what haunts me at night. But that meaning and purpose as Christians, as people who follow a God, we should develop that meaning and purpose to how are we of service to that God. And that's our meaning and purpose. And then the good news is our salvation doesn't exist on that meaning and purpose. Our salvation exists on God's meaning and purpose. Right? That's the beauty, is that we as the created strive to have purpose to serve the God who created us. But when it comes to how we exist, when it comes to the freedom of not living under the dredge of what that is, when it comes to the hope of the ever after, that does not depend on our purpose. It depends on God's purpose. Who, when God created, what did God say at the end of every day that it created? And it was good. Right? That's God's purpose. And that's why we did a baptism at the 10:45. And I like to go away from our typical baptism liturgy to again speak about what we are doing now, no one can undo. That what God is doing in this moment, she can't even undo it, because it is God who is the actor in this situation. God is creating the action. We are passive in that space. That's why we don't ever rebaptize. Because what God did once, God never needs to do again, because there's nothing you can do to take that away. And that's the beauty. And so we respond then with our purpose to serve and to help others experience that belonging, that rootedness, that forgiveness, that grace. That's why we exist in that space. Sorry, I get a little passionate about how we understand God's actions. But did I see someone's hand go up? I feel like I almost heard an amen, but I know we're struggling one of these days. I want to see Daisy's Frozen Chosen will give it to me without asking. Other thoughts on this, on purpose meeting? I mean, the last one is loneliness. Right? Loneliness. And we've been talking a lot about loneliness. I just was told that the World Health Organization just declared loneliness as a global pandemic in our world. It's a global pandemic. And again, a God who is a triune God. A God who created God's self in community. And a God who wasn't just happy with words on a page, but a God who enfleshed God's self to walk amongst creation, to build relationship. It is sinful for us as Christians to leave people in loneliness. Now, I will have Thanksgiving by myself with my cats and be alone, but I will not be lonely. There is a difference, right? Solitude is different than loneliness. And so we can allow people the solitude space. Not everyone's a hugger. We can accept that. Right? But loneliness, it is sinful for us to leave people in loneliness. Gail, we just did your memorial service for your husband. There is a depth of loneliness that you are experiencing that we cannot solve for you, but we will sit with you while you are in it. And Bob, your wife's still alive, but you've lost a lot of her to dementia. There's a loneliness you experience as a husband with that woman that, again, none of us can take that away from you, but we can be with you in it and let you know that you're not alone. Right? So sometimes we can't take the loneliness out of someone. There's things that we have to go through in those spaces. But we don't have to leave people alone so that they feel that they have nowhere else to go in that. And what that is. Yeah, Melinda.
Well, also I like what the one person said in the show, because like when I moved away from my comfort zone and moved to Oro Valley, I was very lonely for a long time, but I had to reach out. I had to get out of myself and start a book club and find a church and get involved. And, you know, otherwise I could sit in my loneliness.
Yeah.
But finding community that makes sense to me was
Right.
very important. And I do like solitude, but it was a loneliness of not having any connections.
Yeah, and so there is a two-way street, right? People have to be able to also advocate for themselves, to find it, to be active. I've had people, they leave church. I was like, why did you leave church? Well, because I never was involved in anything. Okay, great. Did you try? You know, like, did you call the group? Did you ask? You know, because I'm sorry, we can't everyone. We're gonna fail if we try everyone. But did you try anything as well, right? And so how do we to reach out? It has to be that two-way street. Yeah.
I think the experience we all went through with the COVID pandemic created kind of a new kind of loneliness in the sense that you had to stay isolated.
Mm-hmm.
Coming out of it, I know we had lots of social groups and activities that came to a halt. And it's sort of, you have to overcome a lethargy that happens with resuming those activities and re-involving yourself in inviting people over for dinner and just things
Yeah.
that we used to do all the time. It's sort of like I think, oh gosh, it's so much, there's an effort. But
Yeah.
you need the connection.
Yeah, COVID changed us. She was talking about COVID, that forced isolation, right? That forced breaking of so many of our social connections. And so now we are in a space of reconnecting, and we have to go back into those process of actually being intentional about it, about actually redoing those things, which is why yesterday, we did Resurrection at the movies, right? I was like, all right, everyone likes a good movie, so we had 100 of us sitting in a movie theater, shoulder to shoulder, because we had it all sold out. And that's why we're going to do Resurrection Sings in December, December 11th, up at the Oro Valley Gaslight. So it's the Oro Valley Music Hall up here. And we've rented it out. He gave the space to us for free, actually. And we're going to get together and sing Christmas songs, right? And to invite your friends, invite your neighbors. It's just a great time. They've got food and drink. People can order. Kids can run around. And again, it's as an organization, as an institution, we can begin to provide those opportunities, but then people have to then show up. Right? And so it is that both and, but how do we have times of connection and what that looks like? Yeah. So doors will open at 5:30 with music starting at 6. And if you've ever been to the Gaslight, there are all kinds of little tables, and so you can come in, and we'll probably force people to sit with people they don't know, just so we can all kind of get together. There's waitresses and wait staff. They'll come to the table. They've got really good pizza. They do have really good pizza. Yeah, and so then we're just going to get together. We're going to make some hymnals, and so we'll do Christmas songs, and it's just real loosey-goosey. Wear your Christmas swag. I don't say ugly sweaters because what one person's ugly is another person's beautiful. I don't want to yuck anyone's yum, so wear your crazy Christmas swag. We'll probably do a little bit of a devotional, but our goal is 6 to 6:45. We'll do music, then we'll take like a 30-minute set break. People can have conversations, whatnot, and then we'll do a final 7:15 to 7:45 final songs, and then prayer, and then we'll be done by 8. So then people can go home.
But one of the people that I invited wanted to know how much the tickets were.
Free.
That's what I thought.
Yep. This again is because of the generosity of the owner there, and he knows he'll make it up in drinks and food, and so. We want people to eat and drink liberally, and so we did not have to charge any kind of cost, and they also can seat like around 250 or so we also don't need to do any registrations. Because especially for the other generations, I was saying this beforehand, again, when this happened, I was in Denver, so this is 2003 to 7, high school kid. Say, Aaron, you didn't have a cell phone growing up, did you? No, didn't have a cell phone. So how'd you know what you're going to do on a Friday night? I said, oh, this is funny. See, there's this thing called making plans. And so we'd actually start on Monday. We'd have conversations. We kind of figured out by about Wednesday, Thursday, and then we'd tell our parents, and guess what? On Friday, we stuck to those plans. And this was the response. Well, we just get in the car and then text our friends and see where they're at. But think about that. So that was in 03-05. So those people are now the ones who are raising the children, right? They're in their 20s and whatnot. So these whole generations, that their default is not to make these concrete plans. And so in some of these events, we know there will be people that Monday afternoon will be like, hey, we're not doing anything tonight. Should we go to that Resurrection Sings thing? Right, so we have to leave room, so we're trying to figure out when we need to do reservations, when we don't, so that we're able to kind of accommodate, because there's a whole generations that are growing up that literally they look on their phone and the plans have changed. Like they'll say, oh, we're going to go here on Friday night, but then they get and someone texts, yeah, that place was boring, now we're going to go here, right? And so they're used to more of these fluid kind of plans, which just aggravates all of us. It's like, just make a plan and stick to it. But that is to combat the loneliness, right? Is to be able to find times to be together, to be in group together. I do find worship is a place where I can have solitude around others. There have been times where I have been moved to tears in worship and just needed the heartbeats of others. I did not need a conversation. I did not need a hand on a shoulder. I needed to be where I was, feeling what I was feeling, but having the heartbeat of others around me to know that I wasn't alone. And so how we can give that space for people. All right, I want to be respectful of time, plus I have a lunch date with Pastor Sharon, and I don't want to be late. And so this next week we will not be meeting. Enjoy your Thanksgiving. I just saw this great thing, leftovers. If you are someone who are inviting people, get muffin tins, and then they can put all of the things for leftovers. And then you actually just put it right in the oven and actually cook. But then it's like individual portions of all your leftovers. I'm someone, when I get invited to holidays, I bring my own Tupperware for leftovers. So because, right? I mean, you get invited, but then you don't get the leftovers. That's not how I roll. I bring my Tupperware and you're giving me leftovers. So enjoy your holidays. Have a wonderful time. Again, we've got thank you. Yes, I will be heading off to Florida next week to finish off my father's ashes and honoring his wishes. But I will just to share with all of you, I'm doing this to honor my dad's wishes. But through your generosity, you guys donated a brick in my father's name in Memorial Plaza. That has been, for me, my space for my father. And so I love that every day I pull into the parking lot and I have that space for him. So I'm doing this to kind of finalize, all right, Dad, I've done everything you needed. You're good to go. Emotionally, that has been my space. And so thank you for giving me that space with my dad. Let's end in prayer and then we can go. Lord God, We thank you for who you are and how you've called us to be in this place and space with you. We give you thanks for accepting our failures, for knowing that you are never disappointed in who we are because you made us good, and calling us to live into places where we do succeed and serve in your name. For all of those who are lonely, Lord, for those who do not know you, for those who are experiencing great grief and mourning, especially at this holiday time, help us to reach out, send us to them, so that we can share your